when you write a book about immigrant life, you can do it in two ways. You can either start with the basic challenges that an immigrant would face, let's say language, getting used to the culture of the new foreign country you're in. You can then go a bit deeper to try to contrast the different cultures and then the loneliness that comes with it, finding your own community and dealing with isolation. You can still dig deeper and start talking about discrimination, how you deal with it, and what effect that has on your psyche. This is one way to do it. This is the easy way to do it. What Monica Kim does in this book is she goes even deeper and starts talking about internalized hatred. You have this character Umma, where she is portrayed as someone who puts Americans on a pedestal. She hates her own Korean culture and heritage and the place where she comes from. She views that as backward. This is apparent in one of the earlier conversations with her daughters, Ji-yoon and Ji-won, where she says that Korean men are the worst in dating and American men, or maybe the term used was white men, are the best at dating. There is this argument that Ji-won makes, rightfully, that not all men, obviously, but she doesn't have an answer to that. She just views white men as superior to her own Korean people. And this leads to many other things, her giving way too much leeway to George, for example, with his shitty behavior. And anyway, the point I was making was that the author did a lot of research to understand and address immigrant issues in a smart way. Let's put it like that. This is a complex issue, and a few things that I thought about while I was reading it was that Umma as a character should have some role models to look up to in the Korean community so that she doesn't view this American guy as the god figure here. And she has to have pride in her own culture and her own identity, as should any other immigrant who especially is dealing with internalized racism or internalized hatred against your own culture. Anyway, so much for an intro to this review, which is on the book The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monika Kim. I'll try to keep this review short. First of all, the book is short, and also because the plot of this book is what drives it. There isn't much to think about in a philosophical sense of the word, let's say. Getting into this book, I was looking for a good, strong female character and a female serial killer, to be specific, especially someone who is annoyed with the abusive men around her and goes on a killing spree. Well, the main character in this book does that partially, at least towards the end, but the first few characters she murders are homeless people and someone she doesn't know, so I don't know if that counts. But okay, I'm again jumping the gun. I'll talk about the characters a bit, then we can go into the plot and some theme uh, that ties together all of this, and then we can call the review at that. The first character would be Omma. And okay, the pronunciation is Omma, O-M-M-A. I had to look this up because in my family I call my mother Amma, which is A-M-M-A, but in Korean I suppose it is O-E-M-M-A, something like that, and it's referred to as U-M-M-A here, so it's not Umma, it's Omma. That's the first thing. And after that, the thing that annoys me most about this character, I can give her that she lets men's mistakes slide because maybe from a very young age that has been inculcated into her lifestyle, that there are men around her who dictate many things in her life and she has very little freedom to do what she actually wants, so she goes along with whatever your partner or father tells you. That is one thing. I can let that slide. But what I don't get is, how can someone spend all of their waking hours making flowers? I don't get it. How many flowers are you making? And what kind of wedding preparation requires you to do so much for months on end and still not be through to anyway coming close? How is it possible that there is so much wedding preparation to do and she does all of it all the time? There is nothing else this woman does. Also, how desperate are you for validation? Do you really have to ask your daughter if you are a monster and if you really look good all the time and why you're single all the time? How tough is it to be by yourself and be content with yourself? I don't get it. Maybe you haven't lived a life where you took independent decisions, but it can be that hard that you start sobbing on the floor with hair disheveled and don't realize that you have been doing that for hours and letting yourself go so much that your daughter has to come wake you up from that stupor. I don't understand this woman. I'm sorry. She is the embodiment of someone who doesn't value her time, her own identity. She always looks for that from her male counterparts and just doesn't stand up for herself at all. She just tolerates all the bullshit that people around her do. And maybe she might slap the hand of one of her daughters, but that's all she does. Okay, that's that. That's Oma for you. Then you have our main character, Jiwon. I really like this character. She craves blue eyes, and this isn't by accident or anything. Maybe it's explained through a tumor later in the book, but also major spoilers for this review, by the way, if you haven't read this book. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. So she starts by eating fish eyes, then she has some vivid dreams about blue eyes and how tasty they might look. And there is some stats thrown in that only 8% of people have blue eyes, but many people around her seem to be having that. And somehow she starts craving them, and then she goes on a murdering spree looking for blue eyes. It's also interesting how she looks down on people with eyes that are of a different color, except for Alexis, of course. But Joffrey in particular has brown eyes, and she somehow compares that to dirt and sand. And I don't know, it's interesting how some small detail like that can bring down a whole person for you. Very interesting. Then we have Ji Yoon, who also doesn't have much of a role to play except for a crying sister and a sexual attraction object for George, but we'll come to that later. Yeah, okay, we touched on George, so we can go to him next. He's the typical white male asshole character who knows that he has to be right every time. He talks condescendingly to all the women around him. He has something called yellow fever. I think that is the term for people who are attracted only to Asians. So he goes out on trips to Thailand and specifically to Chinese restaurants to gawk at the waitress, let's say. He has, I don't know how much money he has, but it is said to be a lot, and somehow that puts him at a pedestal again for Umma. So some weird dynamic going on there. And obviously it helps with him exerting some power over the family. Okay, that's George. Again, two very annoying characters. Joffrey I kind of liked. He is the male friend of Ji Won. I somehow imagined him to be black when he was first introduced, but then it's made clear that he is white. It's interesting how in books you can't tell skin color unless you explicitly mentioned it. And maybe that's something the author has to keep in mind, that people might be imagining Joffrey to be black. I don't know how that came in either. Maybe it was something, oh, I know why, because he had this book by Adichie. I think We Are All Feminists. That's what he was caring about. So I think I had that impression in my mind, and I assumed that this guy must be black. Again, I know, my bad, but that's in the plot. So very interesting. Also, on a side note, it's interesting that this other book by Adichie, it's Half of a Yellow Sun, also has a sister duo who have some strained relationship with their fathers and mothers, but and even between them the dynamic is tricky to say the least. But here it's a clear elder sister younger sister dynamic between Ji Won and Ji Yoon. Okay, that's I just wanted to mention that as an aside. When I was reading that, that just came to my mind. And also the TED Talk by Adichie. Again, now looking back on it, all of those conversations are super cringe. And I don't think anyone talks like that, but I don't hang around 15-year-old guys and girls, so I don't know if that is how people talk nowadays. Again, anyway, moving forward, who else is left? I touched on Ji Yoon a bit. I felt like there was more to her character that the author should have talked about. The extent to which that goes is that George, the asshole boyfriend of Umma, he talks about her on a cell phone call to some, maybe his friend, and he mentions her being, having a good ass or a good figure. And one thing that I wanted to point out was that I was expecting a lot more between this interaction, the one between George and the younger sister, to give more motivation for Ji-won to kill him in the end. Maybe a scene, maybe it could have been a chapter where George is just creepily looking at the sister through a window or through a slightly open door, or maybe he steals some of her clothing to keep it with her. You've already established George to be this asshole character, so why not give him more? Uh, and maybe establish him as an outright pedophile if that's where you're going, but maybe the author wanted to be a little more careful pushing that character there. Anyway, again, to summarize, I wanted something more to happen between George and the sisters, but as far as I can tell, he doesn't expect any sexual relations from the two girls, except for obviously talking about it with his friend in a nasty and disgusting manner. That's that. Who else is left? These are the main characters. It's also interesting about Joffrey, the male friend. Sorry, I'm jumping here and there, but how he's portrayed as this positive, really feminist friend who always puts his feminist viewpoints forward and tries to help society in a more liberal direction, and hence comes off to be as a more attractive character to the females. But it's also very interesting how Alexis and also G1 in the end immediately catch on to that, which he admits to also later, that he isn't this guy and he's just playing a character. And he does all of these things just to let the girls know that he is on their side, which is such a ridiculous thing to do. But okay, that's it's these few sentences which turns a character from good to bad. To begin with, when he was introduced, I also liked the guy, but after a few chapters, when Alexis says that the way this guy talks is weird, and that's all she says, and immediately there's a switch in my mind that okay, now this character is being shown as a bad character. And so that's how I'm going to look at him. Very interesting how the author takes all of us on this story with her. Okay, what else is there? Can we start talking about the plot? I really loved the imagery, especially the book cover with metal chopstick with blue eyes in them. I had no idea that people ate eyes, first off. And again, to have that on chopsticks where you stab the chopsticks through, is that how you eat those eyes? Why can't you just use your fingers or pick it up like rice with your chopsticks? You have to stab it. But anyway, I really love that visual of something so sensitive like the eyes going into something so sharp and hard like metal chopsticks, and then you eating them. It it creeps me out in just the right ways. And I can definitely say that if given the opportunity, I might be open to trying ice now. Although when the time comes, I might chicken out, who knows. Anyway, moving forward, I really also like how you add little details to those eyes, like the cartilage is hard, or there's some viscous liquid oozing out of it when you chew. This adds so much to the story. It's not Hannibal frying liver on a pan. You add texture to the dish itself, which also brings in more imagination in your mind. And it's not enough to say that she eats eyes. When you say she eats blue eyes, you say she eats blue eyes, which are tender on the inside but crunchy on the outside. All of these little details make it more memorable, and it paint an image in the reader's mind that helps you visualize the plot much more easily, and it hooks you right in, and it makes you remember the plot for much longer. There's some stuff about her friends, which I don't want to go too deep about. There's some stuff about Appa, again, another terrible character who uses Umma for her citizenship and then dumps her for a different girl. Again, I don't want to get too deep into these characters because they are side characters at best. I also found it annoying how Umma justifies the actions of these men. Appa used her for her citizenship. George, again, didn't care a bit about her, but when she sees George with his new girlfriend, she again starts defending George that he found a girl who is much younger, much prettier, so I can understand why he is with her. Like, what? Do you have no self respect at all? Why are you defending the guy who dumped you? Again, some of these things were written specifically to annoy the reader, and I think the author did exactly that with this. There are a few other things that I wanted to mention regarding the themes, where there are these very specific dialogues that you hear from your mother. Something like, "You're gonna miss me when I'm dead." I don't know if this is an immigrant thing or this happens everywhere, but maybe more so when it's just the three of you living in a separate apartment that this sentiment comes to its forefront. But very well caught and very well explained in the book as well. Very entertaining, to say the least. I also had a small gripe with the police. Are you not looking at CCTV cameras at all? Are you not looking for DNA in the knife in the bag that Joffrey stole? Okay, there are some plot holes that are explained, but it's too fantastical, but I can let that slide definitely. These are some of the few issues that I had. Uh, but overall, it is a good book with a very strong female character who kills off some bad men, and I can definitely get behind that. Also, the dream sequences where she's trapped in a box full of ice, it's just chef's kiss. I can't wait for the movie to come out for this book, because first of all this scene, and then the climax scene where at the last moment, when George is beating up JW, you see Joffrey come and hit uh, George as if he's the one who started it all. Very interesting. And also, I was also expecting something more with Joffrey, maybe something like uh, Joffrey followed G1 through and through, and then you say that he didn't know at all that she was the killer. I would have appreciated if Joffrey knew, or maybe found out later when Ji-won was in the hospital. Somehow, maybe he goes through her bag and looks at the knife. Something like that. I expected more from this character Joffrey, apart from being the man you pin it on in the end, and our protagonist going on a different journey to kill her father. Again, interesting, but I would have wanted Joffrey to be more of a part of this story. Those are my thoughts overall. I know I went all over the place, but I didn't want to organize my thoughts and make an hour long review. These are just my quick thoughts, and if you are looking for a good horror gore book, then I have no issues recommending this. I really enjoyed this. It's been a while since I read something so good in the serial killer genre, especially. That's it. Thank you for watching and listening.